Well, on this last day of Black History Month, we're taking a deep dive into one of the most famous singers of all time, James Brown. Fox County's Alex Erbach shows us the seeds of his musical roots were planted just 90 minutes from the upstate.
Wow, I feel good.
Yeah, he was James Brown. He could dance better than everybody else. My father was very strict. He wrote the song, Papa Don't Take No Mess. I lived it.
The hardest working man in show business, soul brother #1, and of course,
The godfather of soul.
James Brown was called many names, but for Dr. Deanna Brown, he was simply Dad.
My dad would always tell me, you will never know what it is like to live like I lived. You wasn't born like I was born.
Before becoming an international superstar and doing his signature scream on key,
Ow! Are you okay if I take off my jacket? I'm getting like hot while talking.
Well, I mean, it's James Brown. You know, you got to take off your cape.
James Brown was born in Barnwell County, South Carolina, and raised in Augusta, Georgia. But filmmaker Deborah Riley Draper knew there was more to unpack about the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer.
I kind of wanted to start from the beginning with him. What was the environment that gave birth to that work ethic, that gave birth to that relentless pursuit of perfection, that gave birth to the notion that you could create funk?
Deborah Riley Draper really dug deep, and she really looked at who he was as a man, as a musician, as a businessman, as a black man from the segregated South who was born in poverty and took what he got because he only went as far as the 7th grade.
Those questions led Deborah to a lesser-known part of James Brown's story during the 1950s and 60s in Toccoa, Georgia.
James Brown came up in conversation because I remember it blew our mind because we were like, he was here? What? Like, why didn't we know this?
Nathan Collins and Kevin Beggs are the owners of Diamond Studios in Toccoa. Both grew up in the small town.
In high school, we didn't have anywhere to go. You know, as musicians, there was nowhere to plug our creative other than church.
So when they decided to open a studio in Toccoa,
we were met with a lot of doubt and confusion. A lot of confusion of, why are you opening a studio in Toccoa, Georgia? Like, there's nothing here.
Except that James Brown started his music career right here in Toccoa, Georgia.
And like, that's really inspirational. Like, these massive names have walked through our town and they've been here.
That spark of inspiration led them to open Diamond Studios in 2020, but they still didn't know how James Brown ended up in their hometown.
And we were like, what the heck? Why was he here?
During those teenage years, he was doing some mischievous things.
James Brown landed in a boys' reform school after he was caught stealing. While there, a young man from Toccoa, Georgia, named Bobby Bird,
which I affectionately call Uncle Bobby,
had a gospel group. That group performed at the reform school James Brown was at.
And James Brown saw a music group and he was like, wow, that's, if I can get out of here, I want to do that.
The two became fast friends.
They were like two peas in the pod.
In order to get out of reform school, Brown needed to have a sponsor, a family to live with.
So Bobby's mother and grandmother said he could come and live with them.
That's the beginning of my father's life in Toccoa, Georgia.
Some in Toccoa still remember James Brown, like Danny Burke.
And he knew my name. He always would say, hey, Danny, how you doing? He was a real friendly person.
Danny has been a deacon at Mount Zion Baptist Church for the last 3 decades. The same church Bobby Bird and James Brown attended.
Now, Bobby used to come back and play that organ. That's the choir where Bobby played the piano.
And the choir James Brown sang gospel music in. His time as a gospel singer in Toccoa was instrumental in shaping the musician James Brown became.
These soulful stirrings that were a part of these worship services are the seeds of all of the sounds that you hear. It's true American sound.
But never one to fade into the background, James Brown took the music to another level.
Uncle Bobby and his group was doing gospel. So when Dad came in, you know, they said, okay, let's try this R&B. So they started doing R&B, and that's when they became the Famous Flames. And all this was going down in Toccoa, Georgia.
Eventually, the group recorded their first hit.
Please, 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 please.
And when they recorded that record, James Brown and all these little boys from Toccoa, woo, off they go.
But Danny said those now famous Flames, who played in world-renowned venues like the Apollo Theater in New York, also played in a not-so-famous place, Danny's home.
I remember when they would get on the piano and get to playing Please, Please, and all those songs. Those songs started right here in Toccoa, but they would play all those songs on that old piano.
One thing Danny wants people to know about Toccoa:
Well, Toccoa has a lot of talent in here. And the only thing they need is somebody to recognize them.
which is exactly what Diamond Studios is trying to do.
I definitely want to leave a legacy that inspires others to chase after things that they view are impossible.
The godfather of soul also realizing how impossible his journey may have seemed to others. During his life on the road, the love of family never stopping while leaving a legacy for generations.
I'd give almost anything right now to get those calls again. But I sometimes sit down and I think how blessed I am to have had a father such as mine. Not a perfect man, but a man with a plan. And a plan that helped other people.
Alexa Erbach, Fox Carolina News.